Hello and welcome back to the Brussels Signal studio. My name is Justin Stairs and today we're talking with Mikula Peksa, who is 37 years old and is a Pirate Party member from the Czech Republic. Now, there are four Pirate Party MEPs currently, of which one is German and three are Czech. Okay. The Pirate Party MEPs sit with the Green Group in the European Parliament, so you are not the first Czech MEP we've had in the studio, but you are the first Green Group member, so you're very welcome, and the first Pirate Party member. So thank you for coming to talk to us. My first question would just be maybe 1 minute on yourself. You have a background in science, and you were a researcher and also a software engineer, is that true? So what made you get into politics, please?
Thank you first for inviting me and having me here and giving me the opportunity to speak. I mean, like, originally I'm, let's say, normal scientist. I started studying physics in Prague, and then later on my colleagues actually helped me to establish contacts to university in Leipzig in Germany. And then I spent some time moving between Prague and Leipzig and kind of like realized that I do not longer consider my home just to be Czechia, but more broadly I started becoming interested in the area what is around, and probably at that point of time I was strongly influenced by the motto of German Pirate Party: European politics is not foreign politics. For me, it was very forming. I realized this is the party that actually stands for the similar beliefs I do, and was actually the reason why I started to be interested more in what the Czech Pirate Party does. Okay,
and you are, I should have mentioned, you are the chairperson of the European Pirate Party, correct? And now, so there are three MEPs from your country, one from Germany. Why is the Pirate Party so successful in Czechia?
Well, the situation in different European countries is very different. I mean, in Czech, the system is kind of let's say, more open to new parties. I mean, you have easier conditions for registration, you have easier conditions for getting the public funding. So over the time, we have developed a strategy how to get the party into the parliament. Whereas, for example, in Germany or France, the situation for newcomers into the system is way more complicated. Okay. So I would say we had a good organization and we were somehow historically lucky by the conditions.
Historically lucky? What do you mean by that, historically lucky?
Well, I mean, like, probably Czechia was, in a way, one of the easiest places to actually born or to spread the new pirate movement. So we took the opportunity and built a party in Czechia, but there are also successful pirate parties in Luxembourg or Iceland. So it's not impossible, but you really need to get into the system, because the existing parties, they set up various like administrative obstacles to prevent newcomers to enter into the system.
I understand. Now, within the European Parliament, you sit within the Green Group. I presume that's because your principles align best with the Green Group principles, correct?
I would say we are very much based on data-driven policy, and we are living in the times of global climate crisis. Concerning the fact that we are scientists and we kind of like realize that this is a huge problem, naturally, I think for us the natural ally is the one who is honestly willing to solve that. So I would say the Greens at that point of view seems to be fitting.
Okay, are there any policy differences with, I mean, I guess within every group you get policy differences, don't you? But I mean, it's important within the European Parliament to be a member of a group as you get more speaking time and access to funds, this kind of thing, right?
Yes, those administrative incentives certainly play a role to be part of the group. Also, there are differences clearly between the Greens and Pirates. I mean,
for example?
I would say sometimes in the digital policies, for example, the question of how do we perceive cryptocurrencies, there clearly we stay on the side of like technological progress, whereas the Greens are way more cautious compared to us.
Okay, maybe we can touch on that. Anyway, the first big topic I have here is, I know it's close to the heart of the Pirate Party, and that is ethics and reform within the European Parliament. Obviously, Qatargate has been a big story, one of several big stories over the past year or less than a year. There have been proposals for reform. The EU ombudswoman says these proposals do not go far enough. What is your opinion on these proposals, please?
Well, I believe we need way more transparency in the way how the European Parliament operates. I would say just one single small example. General expenditure allowances, the money that the MEPs are getting to actually run the offices. Quite often you see the situation that it is not really like used for the purpose, and rather the people are actually using that for their personal activities.
You mean these are the office costs?
Yeah, these office costs.
They're supposed to be office costs.
Yeah. One of the very first things we as pirates have done, and I believe every single member of the European Parliament can do it, we made all the balance sheets, we made all the invoices public, so that every single person in Europe can see every single cent spent from my allowances, how they are used, what they are used for. Literally, you will learn what type of coffee we are buying for the office. I think this is the way to move forward, because transparency actually prevents misuse of that respective money. And I think this might be the question of allowances, but also very much touches of the context, whom are the MEPs meetings, and so on and so on.
Transparency is the answer. So, but what about these proposals that have been put forward? I mean, there are some changes there. I mean, there's this cooling off period of 6 months, for example. Lots of MEPs end up as lobbyists, let's face it, don't they? And some people say this 6-month cooling off period won't make any difference at all because nothing happens at the beginning of a European Parliament term. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, I would say to a degree certainly yes, although besides the MEPs doing the lobbyism, we shall certainly have criteria to disclose all the, let's say, contacts between the politics and business. Whereas while the European Parliament, for example, is kind of like setting some standard for that, the Council of the European Union is way less reluctant to actually show their cards and show who is actually doing what kind of
they're more reluctant. They're more reluctant to me.
Absolutely,
they're more secretive.
More secretive. I mean, like nowadays, if you want to deliver some particular sentence in the legislation prepared by the EU, way more easier than go to the European Parliament if you are a lobbyist is to go to the, let's say, permanent representation of some European country and present it as a national interest of that respective country.
Right.
Nobody controls that, and very, very easy you get it. Yeah. So I mean, like for the lobbyists nowadays, this is the main source how to get into the EU structure. So quite often you see things that are so-called like dictated from the Brussels, which are in fact dictated in order to kind of like pursue the local business interests.
But obviously Qatargate is the big story, and we have allegations which have been denied that certain countries have been bribing MEPs. I mean, this is a very serious situation, and this is the Parliament problem. It might be a problem for the Commission, I don't know, but the story over the last few months has centred on the Parliament. Are these reforms as proposed enough, in your opinion, to prevent another Qatargate scandal?
Well, I mean, we certainly shall be way more careful about like how the MEPs are, what kind of presents they or gifts they receive, what are their activities, whom they are meeting. That's certainly something that where we should be very strict and very transparent. On the other hand, I mean, besides the way how the MEPs behave, they are still representatives of some political parties which have their connections back in the respective member states.
Right.
There it comes to the problem, because although we will make the European Parliament quite transparent and quite good, then back on the ground in the respective parties, which of course naturally have some influence on the respective elected MEPs, there might be still some influences. So I mean, like the situation is more complicated. Should I be speaking about like natural example which comes to my mind, we might be as strict as we want regarding the MEPs elected from Hungarian Fidesz. But if the Hungarian ruling party in itself has very close ties to Russia and is kind of like enforcing its influence on the respective MEPs and promotes the Russian interests through them, There is no way how to prevent it unless we talk about the rule of law in Hungary.
Okay, but what you're saying, as far as the proposals are concerned in the European Parliament, are you saying they're a step in the right direction? I mean, do you support them?
I would say certainly we support all the steps in the right direction. Also, some of them should be going further.
Okay. Now that's one subject. I want to move on to another one, which is censorship, and Mr. Breton, Commissioner Breton, and the. Do you think the European Commission should have the right to shut down social media platforms?
No, I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea because the social media platforms, they are just a tool for exchanging information between the people. And I strongly believe that people have the right to exchange information among themselves. And all these attempts to actually shut down or restrict the way how they are sharing information between each other, they are bringing us to standards which we might see in the contemporary Turkey or even Iran or China. Worst case scenario, Northern Korea. So this is not the direction we want to go. I mean, like 1984 was not a manual, it was a warning.
Right, okay, so, but it seems to be happening. I mean, it seems to be, we seem to be very close to that situation, don't we? I mean, among your colleagues in the European Parliament, are you in a minority or a majority?
I would say we are unfortunately a bit a minority because a lot of colleagues, they perceive it as a sort of like silver bullet. The Commission will block the social media and everything is nice in their world. I mean, like personally, I spent some of my previous life working in the IT, and I know how easy it is actually, in fact, to overcome those blocks. So if you want to get access to that respective information, you get them. You get them, and there is no way how to prevent you from that. The problem is that a lot of people, they don't know. They don't know, and I think there should be equality. I mean, like, not only the people who with good knowledge of cryptography and good IT skills should be allowed to actually share the information. Everybody shall be allowed to share the information, which brings me to that idea that it's not good to cut the people from the access to the information, because wrongdoers will anyway find it, but the good people, they will be just like locked under that censorship.
Right. Okay. And where are we exactly with that legislation now? I mean, we're very close to the Commission actually having these rights now, right? In fact, doesn't the Commission already have these rights?
Well, I would say technically not yet completely, but the various pieces of the whole structure are being built, and that's certainly not good. I mean, still the digital landscape of Europe is kind of like fragmented, so it's not that easy to do so. But technically, yes, Commission could be able to do so, and then it's a natural question under like what political mandate the Commission would do it. And what would be the, let's say, political goals pursued? I believe all of us, we do agree, and I'm certainly of that opinion, that we don't want Russian propaganda, we don't want Russian influence in Europe. That's certainly something where we do agree. But then there are more niche issues. I mean, like, it can touch religion, it can touch other beliefs, history, whatsoever. And there we are getting on thinner and thinner ice. And we should be very careful about like whether the Commission shall just suddenly like deploy the only truth for the whole Europe from Brussels.
The arbiter of truth, right?
That will be very, very.
Yeah, I'm curious. Does this opinion vary according to nationality? Are there certain nationalities who are more pro free speech than others, or does it vary? Is it more or less evenly divided in every country?
I think there are different perceptions of how to perceive it. Should I name one of the like big divisions? If you look into the Eastern Europe, people are generally more cautious about anything which is related with the communist regimes that were present there.
Because of their history.
Because of the history. Whereas if you come to the West, some of the ideas that would qualify to be like outrageous in the East are taken as a way more relaxed way. But clearly you see a very different approach when it comes to the debates about the history between, let's say, for example, Germany and the other countries surrounding it, because for whatsoever like historical reasons. Yeah, I mean, like some things might be more sensitive in some countries than others.
Right, okay. It depends on the subject, I guess. Can we go on now to the future of the European Union? The European Parliament has produced a report on treaty change. I presume you support the report. Are you in favour of abolishing the veto, for example?
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the core policies we have. It's actually part of the common European election program that we have as pirate parties approved for the upcoming European elections. So this is part of our reform effort that we pursue. I mean, the veto itself, it's problematic. I mean, it gives all the power to effectively one prime minister of some European member states who, by blackmailing, can actually use it to achieve various goals. And I mean, we have in the last years seen cases where clearly, like for example, Polish government or Hungarian government use the veto in absolutely like unrelated matters in order to blackmail all the others in order to get some money from the European budget. So I think this is not really like a good solution. I mean, like there should be a way how to overcome situations where one of the representatives of the member state has for whatsoever reasons, for whatsoever motivational reasons to actually block anything and put the others to the...
And in your opinion, should this apply in areas such as foreign policy as well?
I would say in foreign policy it makes very much sense because any round of sanctions against Russia, always we are thinking about like how much is actually the Hungarian government corrupted by Russians and how much they use it to actually prevent Europe to actually apply sanctions or introduce sanctions against Russia. So from that point of view, I'm afraid that we really needed it.
Okay, and what about, I guess, playing devil's advocate? Some people would say that if these treaty changes take place, the power will, in fact, there'll be huge transfer of power to your institution and to the European Commission, who are further away from the electorate.
Well, it shall be noted that actually 95% of decisions are now being decided by voting. The only remaining 5%, you mentioned the foreign policy, it's one of the cases, are the situations where the unanimity is still used. Although 95% of the system is already reformed, we haven't seen any collapse, like the world still works. Yeah, I mean, like we are still able to kind of like work with each other. So where is the problem?
The European Union is still functioning, I guess, but there has been a rise in Euroscepticism.
Well, I'm afraid that this is actually the general feature of Euroscepticism, because those Eurosceptics, whatever you do, they have to blame Brussels for being wrong. Because at the end of the day, their whole business model, if I say it that way, is to blame Brussels of being wrong. If Brussels would accidentally be somehow right, then their raison d'etre, the reasons why the Eurosceptics actually live, operate, and get more support in the elections would be nullified. So they still need to keep this rhetorics. And I mean, like, yeah, the rhetorics is kind of successful because for people, because of its intransparency, it's hard to orient in what the EU does. But maybe should the EU be more transparent, more open, more honest towards its own citizens, they would have a reason to trust it and not trust those Eurosceptic populists.
Okay, let's move on. I don't want to keep you too long. We have a couple of more subjects that I'd like to touch on. Ukraine war. You're on the delegation to Ukraine, so this is a subject that you're no doubt well informed on. What's your thoughts on the role the EU is playing and the way the war is going? What's the latest from your perspective?
Well, I believe we as the EU shall stay for it. I mean, like maybe it's because of my origin, because I'm at the end of the day a person who was born in the former communist Czechoslovakia.
Right.
I'm not that old, but still I remember at least the years after the revolution. And I absolutely understand that as much as important for us was this return to Europe, it's now very important for the Ukrainians. But we were lucky because we actually had our Velvet Revolution where there were no people killed, Whereas in case of Ukrainians, they literally fight and die for the right to get in Europe. So from my point of view, this is actually an extraordinary showcase of proud citizenship the Ukrainian people do, and it's proud citizenship of Europe. And from that point of view, I believe they deserve support and they deserve right to be part of the family. Unfortunately, I mean, like over the time, quite often we have faced the situation that the support was for various reasons denied. Also, I believe we could be faster, we could be more efficient. I mean, the amount of money, the way how we are kind of like producing supplies we are sent to the Ukraine would be could be bigger, could be more efficient, and we are still struggling with that. I mean, the sanctions against Russia that shall support Ukraine, they are theoretically very good. Still, in practice, when they shall be implemented, it's quite complicated. I mean, I'm a member of Budgetary Control Committee, and we have done analysis of how the companies that are allegedly owned by Russians or Russian oligarchs earn or win public procurements in Europe, and how much money they actually earn through that. Well, to be honest, I'm afraid that nothing changed.
So it doesn't. You're saying the sanctions don't work? Is that
they do not work? And quite clearly, you can see it. Yeah, if you are a public servant in any like village and you are supposed to do reconstruction of whatever bridge or whatsoever, you first and foremost shall exclude all the companies that are connected to Russia from the respective procurement. But how do you recognize them? Do you know who is the final beneficiary? Well, it's
difficult to say who's behind.
There is no register of final beneficiaries.
Okay.
I mean, like, how do you know whether they are owned by Oleg Deripaska or some other?
I guess this is a problem with all sanctions of any type, right?
Absolutely.
In principle, they don't work. That's what you're saying.
Many sanctions do actually work. On the other hand, if we want to be efficient in this discipline, we certainly need way more transparency in the way how we organize like the business register. The businesses shall be transparent by means of who owns them and for what interests they do serve. And nowadays in Europe, if you have company A owning company B owning company C, one of them in Ireland, another in Cyprus, another in Luxembourg, hardly you can even restore the chain of
Right, but I guess that would require global reform.
Well, yes and no. I mean, that global reform is very much possible. I mean, like we have anti-money laundering legislation. We have certain standard for what is expected from the companies to report when they are operating in the common European market. We just need to a little bit increase the standards so that the companies are really, in fact, transparent. And then we need the interoperability of the respective databases. I mean, like nowadays, the problem is that everything is in different systems and it's not compatible with each other.
So it's a technological issue to a certain extent.
Of course, very much, yeah. So we need to work on the technology as well. And I mean, like, from the point of view of, let's say, IT person, I would say technically it's possible. It's not a rocket science. We know how to do it. The problem is to politically implement that, to actually have the will to change the existing systems.
But going back to Ukraine, obviously these are changes that won't be implemented in the near future. Therefore, as far as the sanctions regime is concerned, or what can be done?
Well, I think still Ukraine very much struggles with the amount of supplies they receive, and also with the quality. Yeah? Whereas, for example, the US Army has, I think, like 20 or 30 different weapon systems. Across Europe, if you like look on all the countries, you see like 130 of different weapon systems. Now imagine that all the European countries send their weapons to the Ukraine. This is like nightmare for anyone who organizes logistics, who strives for replaceable parts, ammunition, to make all these systems technically compatible and to keep the army up and running. I mean, this is really a challenge for them, and this is an exercise that we need to solve on our side, because our defense industry, let's be honest, it's totally fragmented and totally chaotic, unable to have like clear focus and provide clear supply for the Ukraine. So I think nowadays it's Ukraine, but imagine that whole Europe would be in war. We would be unable to operate our systems
There is no
together.
European army, or even a European procurement policy.
Well, nothing like that. So this is an exercise we shall resolve as soon as possible.
Okay, okay. But as far as Ukraine is concerned, I guess there's not a lot else that Europe can do?
Well, I believe certainly we can do. I mean, like the damages that happen over there, as well as the amount of casualties is tremendous. And certainly the amount of money we could supply for that purpose shall be very higher. I mean, like, I'm a bit like concerned about the fact that the US, which are technically or geographically not part of this continent, are providing more supplies.
The majority,
to European
right?
countries.
So.
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, like Ukraine is practically speaking, or technically speaking, European neighbor. I mean, like neighbor of the European Union, as applying for membership, and we are unable to deliver bigger support than the country, which is actually over the ocean. This is a shame.
And I guess you must be watching the US elections because things could change. Support for Ukraine could change.
Yes, very much. I mean, like I'm personally very skeptical about the far right tendencies currently spanning in the U.S. Republican Party. I mean, what we have seen on the 6th of January 2021 was very worrying. From my point of view, this was an attempt to actually take the state by force, to actually run a coup d'etat. And from that perspective, I'm very skeptical about what could possibly happen should there be an attempt, should there be like a Republican victory in 2024, or respectively Republican president in 2025. I mean, like Europe shall be prepared for that situation, because suddenly we might enter into the situation that we are no longer provided with the support from the US as we have been used to.
Right. Okay, I have one other subject I'd like to talk with you about, and that is migration. Obviously, in the news this week because of the arrivals in Lampedusa in particular. We've had, I've been talking to a few MEPs from the other half of the European Parliament, let's say, from the centre-right and right, who seem, my impression is there seems to be a movement towards calling for even a naval blockade of northern Africa. I mean, is it fair to say, I ask you, that the situation we have today is not working?
Well,
the policies we have in place.
The situation as it is becoming critical, but then let's talk about the solution. Because if you block the northern Africa, imagine that there will be still some people on the coast, and those people will try to solve their situation somehow. Yeah, let's rather not think about how, and rather think about like what actually convinced them to go there, and then suddenly you have to think about all those countries of the global south, which are becoming or getting into more and more troubles. Yeah, I mean, like we are talking about climate change, and for us, it's let's say something which may cause floods, may cause droughts. We are losing people. Yeah, some parts of the world are now becoming technically inhabitable for human beings. This is what is ongoing. And when we are talking about what happens close to the equator, we will at some point of time realize that all those people who currently live there will have to move somewhere else unless we do something. Again, we are to the question. Yeah, we have the climate change, and we need to stop it. We need to stop it ASAP, because otherwise there will not be just like hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people. There will be tens of millions of people, or worst case scenario, hundreds of millions of people moving. And I mean, whatever you say about naval blockade is absolutely unrealistic if there will be hundreds of millions of people in the move. So we need to solve the real problem, the real cause, what causes the migration.
Okay, and climate change, you're saying, is one of those causes. Okay, so but what about then the Migration Pact, which is the EU answer, still under negotiation? What's your view on that solution?
Well, I'm a bit torn on this issue, because on one hand, seems that there is actually a solution at the end of this like long discussion after 8 years of struggles between European politicians on how to solve the issue. So I would be kind of happy for that. The problem is that there are some principles where I'm not really super convinced it's the best. Yeah, I mean, like there is a lot of effort to actually externalize the whole asylum process, to actually like push the applicants outside of the EU, which eventually puts them into the situation that our laws will not apply for them, but some different laws we don't know even yet what kind of. Yeah. Imagine that all the people that are technically applying for asylum or want to apply for asylum in Europe and are still staying in Turkey would be treated like equally. I mean, like being a person who is in Turkish refugee camp, you might have like different options. If you are, let's say, Sunni Muslim, you are kind of fine. The problem is if you are from some religious minority, like for example Yazidis, which have technically nothing to do with Islam, then you might face way more like discrimination, rapes and stuff like that. And that happens because that happens out of European laws, that happens under the Turkish law. And from my point of view, I think this is not a good solution. The laws shall apply for everybody, even for people who just apply for being treated as humans and get the opportunity to be rescued somehow in Europe.
So you're saying that these applications should be processed in the European Union?
Absolutely. It should be processed in European Union and according to European laws.
And what about the people who say, look what's happening in Lampedusa? I understand from today's news that the problem is spreading to mainland Italy, that some towns, in particular in the south of the Mediterranean, will be overrun. What's the solution?
Well, but that's precisely the result of this long discussion and the fact that we have no solution. Italy is facing the situation, let's say, alone, and certainly we shall find a way how to kind of like share the burden. I mean, like, why actually is Lampedusa just the only place where this logistics situation is actually resolved? Yeah? I mean, like, the logistical situation in the southern Europe is again becoming critical. And where is our response? Do we have some like reinforcements? Do we have some spare tents or money or anything to actually support the people in Italy who have the problem? I mean, like, where are our reserves? Have we prepared the reserves? There are no reserves. And now we are again surprised, why is it happening? But what we certainly need is to create a reserve on the European level that whenever Italy has logistical problems with a lot of people incoming, or Slovakia, because that was the case when the Ukrainian crisis started. Whenever this happens, we shall be able to deploy our reserves and to help that respective country which is in the trouble.
And that includes the so-called solidarity mechanism, where the arrivals are spread out throughout the EU. Is that a solution?
Well, honestly, I'm a bit skeptical about this one, because whenever you tell somebody, go to the other side of the continent and apply for whatsoever in that respective country, it's technically complicated to ensure that the respective person goes there where you order them. Yeah? So I think the better solution would be actually to keep the process somehow under control in the countries of
arrival. Okay. So does that mean you'll be supporting the Migration Pact legislation as it stands?
I cannot honestly tell you, because I know that even within the Pirate Party on those issues there are quite some differences. Some people are open to compromise. Some people say, despite we have no solution, we cannot just like go to these violations of human rights. So I cannot tell you what will be the final outcome.
Okay. And finally, your predictions for next year, the European elections. How will the Parliament look after the elections, do you think?
Well, I believe there will be more pirates than this time, in the sense that there will be pirates coming from Czechia, Germany, Luxembourg, hopefully Slovenia, and some other countries. On the other hand, despite more pirates, the Parliament will be way more conservative, and this is a problem.
A swing to the right, do you think?
I would say so, because clearly the conservative forces all across Europe are mobilizing. So I think what is needed for pirates and more general, let's say, for all like progressive, liberal, open-minded movements, we need to mobilize as well. We need people to come to the election and to defend free Europe, because if Europe will be not free, then our home is gone.
Mr. Peksa, that's 30 minutes. Thank you again for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.